Hello and welcome. As we have a great guest, Chairman Frank Pallone, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce, the House Energy and Commerce Committee, where I served with Chairman Pallone for a decade. That was a long time ago, and I have great memories of our work together. You've been in Congress for 34 years, 17 terms. 2 years ago, you took over as chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. During that time, you've been a leader in healthcare, everything from Medicare to the Children's Health Insurance Program to research on all major disease categories, from brain disorders. You've helped out tremendously communities that have been hard hit by the opioid crisis. A champion for the community health centers, and also all the work you've done in energy, environment, broadband technology. The Commerce Committee is a special place. It is the first committee of the House with the greatest jurisdiction, and you follow a long line of tremendous chairs of the committee. And so we welcome you to the INCOMPAS Policy Summit. We have been celebrating the 25th anniversary of the 1996 Act this week. We had Chairman Markey, subcommittee chair maybe, Markey and a good friend of both of ours yesterday, as we talked about what has been the success over the last 25 years, but his vision for the next 25 years. And we'd love to give you that opportunity to do the same. You've been very busy over the last 2 years, from robocalls to the pandemic to spectrum policy, a number of different things that really made progress, for our country and helped us get through COVID related crises and to keep America connected. What do you see for the next 2 years for the Energy and Commerce Committee, and in particular on the broadband and technology front?
Well, thank you, Chip, and thank you for those kind remarks and introduction. And we do miss you also on the committee, I have to say. I know, I can't believe how long it's been. You said 34 years. I guess you're right. I don't know. I hadn't even thought it's 34 years. I guess you're right, or close to it in any case. But, we've been working together with you and your members on a number of important issues over the years. And so I hope we can, we'll continue to find ways to be partners in this Congress as we proceed. It's only, I guess, a month or that we've actually been sworn in. And you mentioned that we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Telecommunications Act. I said to Jeff Carroll, I said, I guess, I was like, well, I wasn't here then. And he's like, are you kidding me? Of course you were. I don't like to admit that how long I've been here, but you started out with 34. So obviously I was here 25 years ago. It's hard to believe, though, it's been so long. And everything has changed so much in the tech industry and the telecommunications landscape, Chip. Just for example, we were thinking that back in 96, right, which is when this was passed, if you had any access to home internet at all, it was probably through your home phone, the dial-up service, if probably you didn't, right? And nobody would predict that, we would be doing everything virtually today. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're in this COVID crisis, but it has brought home, the COVID crisis certainly brought home how important doing things virtually is and how easy it is, really. But I did want to say that if you think about the act, the Telecommunications Act, just to mention some of the things it did. First of all, it fostered competition between traditional telecommunications companies. It encouraged new entrants into the marketplace to compete, and it paved the way for the high-speed broadband networks that are so vital today. And then it also created the E-rate program to help communities that provide access to high-speed internet for classrooms and libraries, which was very much in the discussion in the end of the year package and also in this next COVID package. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But there was a lot of what I would call bold thinking that went into the Telecommunications Act. And I think that kind of bold thinking and action is what we need today. Because if anything, COVID pointed out that internet isn't a luxury or a privilege, right? It's an outright necessity. And I keep stressing that because whether you're looking for a job, you're trying to get an education, or you're trying to get health care, through telecommunications, it's no longer a luxury. It's something that everybody has to have. And COVID has made that clear. COVID has made a lot of things clear, but that's certainly one of them. And what I hear most about are kids that are locked out, right? Because they don't have access to the internet. Because most in New Jersey, and I'm sure it's around the country, most schools are virtual and still not in person. And that's probably going to continue for a while. And I really, it's bad. Like you'll see kids in the parking lot using the public Wi-Fi. Even the library, it came home to me yesterday, not to take up time, but I took my son's laundry because he didn't do it himself to the laundromat, and I wasn't going to wash it, right? So I go to the laundromat, and the woman says to me, "Well, I didn't get my $600 stimulus check." And I said, "Well, I can help you navigate that so you can go on the computer." And she said, "Congressman, I don't have a computer, right?" And then I said, "Well, then you can go to the library." And she said, "I don't want to be insulting to you, but you're obviously out of it because the library's closed and there's no library for me to go to." And so she ended up having to go, I guess, to H&R Block and pay $200 to have her income taxes, and she included the 600 check on that. But it cost her $200 of the 600 that she had, right? So I mean, the problem is, a lot of times, and I put myself in the category, we don't realize how rough it is for people, right? Or they have to, they don't want, they may, if they don't have telecommunications for health, then they have to risk going to the hospital, which is not necessarily a good thing either, right? So the committee's top priority really is to combat and crush the virus, but then at the same time provide relief to struggling families and also to rebuild the economy. But none of that's going to happen without crushing the virus. So I appreciate you're saying what our committee is doing on that. But making broadband universal is definitely our goal. It's not the reality now, but it is the goal. And that's not just, it's not just about running lines to every house. It's about a lot of different things. But I wanted to, if I could address, Chip, 3 connectivity gaps that have to be addressed, right? I'd just like to go through them, because if you ignore these, then you're going to leave people behind, like the woman at the laundromat. And so the first gap is lack of access to broadband. Many inner cities and primarily rural areas don't have access because they lack broadband connections, and private industry isn't going to be able to fill that gap alone. So the government has to make some significant financial investments to bring service to those communities. That's number one. The second is affordability of service. So even if you can connect, you may not be able to afford the service. And so we have to address that. And then the third is what we'll call broadband adoption, which is that, you may be, okay, we have your connection, you can afford the service, but you may not have a computer, or you may not know how to use it because you've never had the skills. So that's also has to be addressed. Consumers who lack the skills to navigate the internet may also fall through the cracks. So as all of you, I think, know, last year, our committee and the House laid out a foundation for a major infrastructure bill called the Moving Forward Act. It was HR 2. And that had more than $100 billion for broadband-related programs for access, affordability, and adoption. Mitch McConnell did not bring it up in the Senate. He didn't bring up much of the Senate, unfortunately. And so it didn't pass the Senate. But we're hoping is that in this next package, right now what we're doing is what I would call primarily a COVID package, right? So tomorrow, I guess it's Thursday, we did the reconciliation and the instructions went to the various committees. I don't want to get into all that, but that was this reconciliation bill that the outlines of which passed last week instructed committees. In our committee, we're doing the healthcare, we deal with the telecommunications, and we deal with the energy components. And we're going to be marking that up on Thursday, hopefully just Thursday. It might go into Friday. And so these are the things that are directly related to COVID. So this is from our committee, is mostly crushing the virus, testing, getting out the vaccine. We are going to try to address, we're going to hopefully address E-rate, but we're talking about immediate problems with COVID, right? We expect that that'll be followed in maybe April or May by what I would call an economic stimulus package. And rather than, be cash for individuals or unemployment, this is investment in infrastructure and other things that will create jobs. And so that's where we hope that this Moving Forward Act, will be incorporated in that, and maybe even be expanded beyond that. So on the bill that, but I did want to say that we also had the end of the year package, which was sort of a down payment on these next two bills, right? And in that we had a newly created emergency broadband benefit. This is going to help people pay their bills, like $50 that they would get to help pay their internet service. And the FCC is currently working to set up that program. We think it's going to be set up in February or March, either the end of this month or early March. But I really wanted to ask all the internet providers represented here today to participate in this program, because it is voluntary. You don't have to participate. Now, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't, because you're going to get $50, but maybe you don't think it's worth it. I don't know. I don't know what you guys do all the time. So we would ask you to participate in it. The other thing that I wanted to mention is net neutrality, right? It was very interesting because I guess it was yesterday or the day before, the Biden Justice Department decided to withdraw the suit. Some of the providers, I guess, had sued the FCC. No, sued California, because California was setting up its own net neutrality standard. But then the Justice Department joined that suit. And yesterday, Biden's Justice Department, the current Justice Department, withdrew from that. So I thought that was significant. But we want to bring back net neutrality. We'll see if it's going to be done through the FCC or through legislation. But we definitely want to bring that back. And then the last thing I did want to mention is I'll call it social media Section 230, Chip. We obviously, I'm concerned, and our committee's concerned, that there be a safe environment on the internet. And of course, Section 230 was meant to foster an open internet and enable platforms to take down harmful content. And of course, this has come up a lot because of the attack on the Capitol in January, and the feeling that a lot of that was encouraged by social media and misinformation on social media. But some have used this as a shield to defend an action, and even when something is objectively harmful or false, they don't take it down. So we're going to look into Section 230. I mean, you just can't eliminate. I know the president at one point just wanted to get rid of it when the Armed Services Bill, he made a big deal. That doesn't make sense. But it's not going to be easy to figure out what's the best way to deal with this. It needs to be reformed. We will have hearings, but I don't have a specific answer to you now about how to reform it, other than to say that we want to reform it. We're not going to just repeal it. And I think that's it. I mean, obviously I could talk a lot more about these things, and maybe you just want to ask some questions rather than my keep going on here, Chip.
Well, one, all of our member companies, and we represent leading streaming companies, internet companies, and then the broadband builders, the fiber, the small cell, the 5G networks of the future. And so your work, the committee's work, has been tremendous over the last 3-4 years, over the last 2 years. Our members were the first to take the pledge to keep America connected during the pandemic. And now as we come out of that, it seems to me we're at this transformational moment, similar to maybe how we were in the Depression, when the country said every home needs to be connected to electricity. And the same is true now for broadband. It has become the essential service. And the funding that Congress has provided and that will continue to provide as y'all look at the next round of COVID legislation and then the Economic Recovery Act and the infrastructure. So I pledge, and our member companies pledge, to work with you and the committee to meet the needs of the woman you mentioned in your district. How do we help those in low income communities and rural communities, people of color, those who are disadvantaged to have the access and affordability to broadband? And we want to be part of solving that problem with you. So we pledge and commit to being there and trying to help on a bipartisan basis to build the support for the work of your committee. So we're very grateful for your leadership. We look forward to working with you on the COVID package, the infrastructure, the emergency broadband benefit. Our companies will sign up and be part of that. And then how are we smart in the accountability of all of these different programs that are very, very successful, like E-rate, telemedicine, Lifeline, the new USF, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. And on net neutrality, if you want to try to find a permanent solution legislatively, we want to be there to try to find a way to do so that we have predictability and certainty for all those who are investing in the networks, but most importantly for the small businesses and the consumers who want access to the internet without fear of discrimination or being blocked or cut off or are charged on a priority basis. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we want to be there to constructively help you.
Absolutely.
There's one last question on privacy.
Yes.
Any thoughts on privacy legislation? I know that you've been active on that issue, and just one last question on that subject.
Well, we have in the last Congress, we were putting together a bill under the auspices of Jen Schakowsky, who chairs the Commerce and Consumer Protection Subcommittee. And there was a draft, which I think was shared with many of you, if not all of you. But the idea would be to, get more input from some of you and stakeholders, and then introduce a bill that we would try to move. And, in terms of what that focuses on, Chip, in just a very general way, it's basically, limiting, I would say, collection and use of data. So what's in the consumer's interests and what is this consumer's expectation, and not going beyond that, and having full transparency and meaningful control to consumers, and then, holding companies accountable when they fail consumers and don't meet either the transparency or they use the consumer's data in ways that, they would not have expected. I mean, so that's just a sort of a general analysis of what it is, but it is a top priority, and we do intend working with Jan to put this together on a bipartisan basis and introduce it and move it. But like so many things, like Section 230, this is not an easy thing because you're dealing with the First Amendment. You're dealing with so many aspects, but we are determined to do it. Well,
and there's one other, as I think about it, on all of this, having good data, and this on the healthcare side, good data from the mapping. So as we have all of these programs and what we hope is additional funding, how do we make sure it goes to the right place, the right way, and hopefully in a timely way? And so mapping is also very important to our members.
Well, we did, as you know, the mapping was one of the things that we were able to accomplish last year. I mean, I keep putting out the robocalls, even though I still get some. I shouldn't admit it. The mapping and the Huawei, addressing Huawei. Those were kind of the three things that we were able to do on a bipartisan basis. So we did pass that Broadband Data Act. That was part of the, that I think we did actually, McConnell passed that as a freestanding bill. And then we in the end of the year package, we had the appropriations for it. So we had the money to do it. But the issue now is to generate the right maps. So we're going to, basically that's like an oversight function of the committee to make sure that the Biden administration moves quickly to generate the maps, and that they're, good maps, and they're used in informing funding and policy decisions. So that's the kind of the next step that we're working on now. I think that's what you're asking me.
Well, and going to this bipartisan spirit, and as we celebrate the 25th anniversary, as I think back, it was one of the most bipartisan acts with the greatest significant contribution to our life and commerce and economy and education.
But I was wondering, because you mentioned Ed Markey, I really don't remember, because I was only on the committee for a few years at that point, but he probably was the chair of the subcommittee. And
he was
still, he was a big
so
factor.
You had Dingle Markey, and you had Jack Fields.
Yeah, Jack. I see Jack. I still see Jack quite a bit too.
And I was a young staffer working for Senator Lott, and he partnered with Senator Hollings.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you were in the Senate. You were working in the Senate at that point.
That is correct. And then I was elected in the fall of '96, and joined the House in '97.
Yeah, yeah.
Committee 2 years later, and so I had 10 years on the committee, and great memories.
Good. How's everything doing in your state these days?
We're coming out of COVID, and as far as our numbers are going down, and vaccinations are being distributed.
Oh, good.
My parents got their second vaccination, which is a great relief. My father has been battling cancer, and my mother has a heart condition. So once the vaccination comes, it makes a huge difference.
Oh, sure.
Especially for our parents and those with underlying conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hoping the country will become more and more confident and secure as we make progress on COVID. And Congress and the new administration as they focus on making sure that we are healthy and well as it relates to COVID. And then I agree that the next step of the economic recovery and legislation will be very important.
Well, you mentioned the community health centers when you were introducing me, and we were on the phone this morning with the president, and some of those who really have prioritized community health centers as a way of trying to push out the vaccine directly in underserved areas. And so, like Jim Clyburn, for example, using South Carolina as an example, and some of the other people that represented, states that had large rural areas. So, I spent a lot of time on that as a way of trying to reach out to rural and underserved areas. But I have to tell you, now Jeff is going to get mad at me, because he's going to say, how stupid can you be? But I always watch, and my wife watches that show, that home improvement show that's in Mississippi. What is it?
That's my hometown. So my hometown,
it's Laurel, right?
Laurel is my hometown.
Laurel.
So that's where I was born and grew up.
Is that really your town?
Yes,
and you represented it when you were in the Congress? You represented it too.
I did. I represented that county. That's where I grew up. That's where I was.
It's so funny. I love that show.
And they actually restored my childhood home.
Did they really?
The Pickering House.
But I mean, it's just, there's so many older homes and historic homes, and the couple are just fantastic. They really are.
They're Ole Miss grads, and we're very, very proud of it. They were discovered on Facebook, and so
I didn't know that it was your hometown.
Social media helped find my hometown, and
I would love to go there. It seems like a wonderful place.
So we would love to have you in Laurel and in Mississippi, and as we think through, you were talking about community health centers. And I remember working on community health centers when I was in Congress with you and partnering on the funding. But healthcare and telecommunications has now converged.
Yes.
They're not separate any longer. And with telehealth and telemedicine and remote care and remote monitoring, the broadband connectivity everywhere for healthcare is going to be so critical. And
it's absolutely true. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Good talking to you and everybody. Let's keep working together. All right.
We will. And anything I can do with Senator Wicker and I talked with Bob Laude earlier today on the one of the interviews, and Jim Clyburn and Jerry Moran will be part of the policy summit tomorrow. So
Okay, good.
we'll build a coalition around you and look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again. Keep in touch.
Thank
Take
you
care.
very
Bye,
much.
Chip.